Hey guys, welcome back to the podcast. It's Sunday, June 9th, 2020, and I guess it goes without saying that we're going through extraordinary times. I think it's become overstated and even trite to say that we're going through extraordinary times, but because of the depth and breadth of the extraordinariness, it begs calling this out again as an intro to this 3 or 4-part series on what is causing the underlying crisis that we're going through and what we can do about it. First and foremost, I think Ron and I want to talk about this because there's an opportunity here. We have an opportunity to seize the moment and redesign our society to make it work for everyone, not just the 1% or the 0.0003%. This divide has been going on for decades, if not longer. And now we're seeing the consequences of it. We are simultaneously experiencing an economic, health, social, and socio-technological crisis. A great many systematic factors are leading to inequality, social unrest, suffering, and wasted effort. I think now is the time to consider our politics, policy, and values. I think first and foremost, the game is rigged. We've all been a party to a game of competition that has bred and produced an elitist hierarchy. I think that competition once propelled us, but now it consumes and destroys us. And at the forefront of this is, I think, technology's elitist culture. And that's what we're going to dig into today. How tech elitism has contributed, if not led the way towards manifesting an ethos of competitive elitism. And I think it's resulted in the chaos we're seeing. I think the most glaring example of this is the George Floyd protests and the looting that's been at the forefront of our attention for the last 10 days or so. So I'm excited about this one. I mean, what do you think of that?
You know, it seems like this kind of thing has been going on in different waves throughout history. And in every wave, it seems there's some progress made, and there may be some steps taken back, depending on who you are and where you're from. And it certainly seems now is the time, for this current generations in power. And I say generations, right? The silent majority, there's still some of those kind of World War II babies, like my parents are around and are, really the youngest group of that, often confused with baby boomers, but there's still, probably 10 years separated. So we're talking about people born in the mid 40s, but voters, right? And it seems like a lot of them tend to often support the more right agenda than not. And ironically, they also are the ones, regardless of their political views, are, the ones most susceptible to the coronavirus pandemic that we're all having to deal with. And then you got the boomers, and the boomers also seem split into, like, you got the older boomers and younger boomers, and they're really holding most of the power, at least economically, in part because wealth tends to accumulate to you as you get older, both because your career progresses, and then also, your parents and family die, and you start inheriting assets from the generation before you. And then there's the Gen Xers, like me and presumably you. I always forget how old you are, but who are also, in positions of power, running companies and running governments. And then there's millennials now, which everybody thinks are young, but, there's millennials that are pushing 40, I think, right?
Oh, Jesus, really? That makes me feel old.
Right, exactly. So also they are, in the power mix now and getting ready to take the reins, and have, they are in the reins of some of the biggest companies that are in the middle of this thing. We're going to talk about, Facebook and Twitter and Google, right? These are all millennial ran companies. And then the up and comers, right, who are driving social media and social media profits massively off of, regardless of their economic or political beliefs. The Gen Z and the young millennials. And even now, my kids, the generation, whatever they're calling the generation born in the late 2000s, so it's almost like the first time where all these generations have a forum to clash and to debate and to influence, and also a forum to be educated and to
Right.
be aware and to be outraged and to be afraid. And like, it's a really unique time, and it's definitely got to be part of the catalyst that we're seeing now. That's, where it seems like the seams are starting to come apart in some of these points.
Yeah, and I think that's what's causing the opportunity as well. We obviously, social media allows us to be so viscerally involved in the crisis. I mean, we see so many videos and so many firsthand accounts, but it also allows some leverage for us to be involved in change. And maybe that's why this discussion is coming up, because for maybe the first time in history, we do have a lot of leverage to affect the system, or at least it feels like that. And, if it feels like that to me and you, hopefully it feels like that to others, and we try, because, man, this whole game is rigged.
Yeah, it's always been rigged, right? And it is interesting you mentioned leverage, right? Because we do, and the leverage isn't, just the voting booth, which is super important, and this is going to be, at least for America, a very, very important election cycle. But in part because all the generations are using these same tools at different capabilities and different levels of time investment and engagement, and the influence the tools have on them. So Facebook or Twitter are great political examples, but Google search comes into play a lot too, in terms of what's available and easy for you to find. And YouTube, which Google owns, has a massive influence, particularly on the younger generation. These tools not only give us the power to communicate and have the power to influence us, they're also embedded now in government, and they're embedded in corporations. And so the people who leverage these tools best actually have very powerful capabilities at their hands to move these organizations, and as much as the organizations have to move the people. And when I say the people, I'm talking about workers that a company has influence over, or the voting public, right, or the non-voting public. So they're two-edged swords, and we're seeing it, with the protests. These protests are lasting longer and are bigger because of these tools and the ability to reach people and to communicate. And the outrage, both before, the events that created the protests, the tools amplified and allowed people to find more easily. And then even during the protests, we saw a whole bunch of more outrages happen. Massive police brutality in basically every state and every major city was caught on camera, which further, kind of educated everyone that this isn't an isolated one-time thing like it's been treated in the past, right? The whole
Right.
bad apples argument. And it's really starting to, either expose a culture of problems in the police or law enforcement, however you want to look at it. And or it's creating the perception there's a problem in law enforcement culture. And those, as everyone says, right, perception's reality. And so regardless of which of those is more true, I tend to believe there's a actual cultural problem in law enforcement, and it needs to be addressed, but it doesn't matter. The tools and algorithm are pushing it anyways.
Exactly.
And government has to respond, or the algorithms will continue to, across these tools will continue to make the situation more urgent and more compelling that something has to happen.
Yeah. For those who don't know, these algorithms are designed to heighten our emotions. They're either heightened to increase our dopamine response by clicking and swiping, so we get that just the tiniest bit of satisfaction, or they're heightened to increase our fear and disgust and anger which also keeps us scrolling down in this infinite scroll. But not only the algorithms, our culture is set up for just divisiveness. It is set up for the elite, but it's this sense of competition, of, based in a meritocracy, right? And I think that has built America, but things work until they don't. And it seems like it's not working anymore. And it feels like tech culture, of which we are a part, is kind of leading the way to that.
You'd have to be a pretty naive person to believe that people in power do not want to stay in power, and people that are wealthy don't want to stay wealthy. Right. As a majority view of the group, right? There's always outliers on any side of an issue, but so in the end, the people in power have used control of the media, whether it was the printing press or the pulpit, back when the Catholic Church ran the world in the Middle Ages, or then the newspaper and the radio and TV, and now it's social media, right? And divisiveness is a proven tool to help maintain the status quo. Class warfare is great because it turns the attention from one set of problems, whether they're political or non-economic, towards economic ones, and then there's a whole other set of problems that get highlighted to make people not worry about their economic situation. Create a war or create a something that spans a region or a super region that makes people shift their focus. And this is something politicians have done for a long time. Now they have these platforms, and not just politicians, people in power is a better word. And now they have these platforms which make it even easier. Almost everybody has a phone now, regardless of income, across the world. And in the next, it's going to get worse, because I think we probably have like 3 to 4 billion people that have some kind of smartphone now around the world. But in the next 10 years, it'll be closer to the entire world population. Everybody that can hold one in their hands can have one. So everything we're seeing today, we're not at the worst of it yet, I think.
Well, I think the first step is to understand and become aware of how the system is designed, so that you can even begin to see where you might be able to fix it. I don't think most people know how this system is designed, like divisiveness. One of my teachers sent me a video of the Georgia National Guard doing the Macarena with protesters. Have you seen that?
I've seen that, yeah.
So she sent it to me. I'd never seen it. I Google it. It's really hard to find. I mean, that was not picked up by anyone. So it just goes to show, it's just a small example of what social media and what these algorithms are feeding us, and what our culture is feeding us. Like that wasn't on a major news outlet.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it was on Twitter, and if you were in the right group of people, good across your stream, and in part, there's a ton of stuff going on, and so it's easy for things that the media doesn't care about to also get lost. But I do think you're correct. Like, I think these things don't get amplified by the algorithms, but by design, and even the curators, where we still have human curators, news editors or producers or whatever, they also don't really get amplified by that group either. There's some VCs talking about this on Twitter. One of the Lux Capital VCs who's done a great job also staying on top of just kind of the coronavirus and has been a voice of clarity in that. But they've thrown out that social media has really just picked up where the newspapers and other media left off. Where if it bleeds, it leads. That used to be a saying
right.
in news, right? And Fox News has taken that to a whole nother level over the last 30 years. Just a total fear machine that has the baby boomers by the throat and the older generations. But now, it was a short thread and going back and forth on it, and a couple other tech people had joined in, and they landed on actually now with social media, it's more if it outrages, it engages. And
Right.
like that's even more powerful than fear. And for sure, like in these boardrooms, the Jacks of the world or the, Eves or the Zuckerbergs or whatever, these guys are in board meetings. And, I've been in boardrooms like that, and not at those companies, and decks are being shown that are actually saying like, hey, outrage on our platform makes us a lot of money. Fear on our platform makes us a lot of money. Furry cats actually don't make us that much money, right? And cute
Right.
kittens. And they make conscious decision to ensure this stuff is amplified on their platforms. And they make additional decisions to ensure that it's not ignored as well. So there's implicit decision making to make money on this stuff, and then there's also implicit decision making to ensure that the underlying business isn't harmed by some other type of content that could distract you but doesn't lead to more engagement. And these things are tested, and these companies have psychologists working for them, and they have behavioral scientists working for them, and they very, very carefully watch how these things impact people and ultimately impact our bottom line. And they like to hide behind free speech as the thing, but it has nothing to do with free speech, right? Like
Right. It has everything to do with making money.
It's totally about the money, and everybody inside these companies have some level of being complicit. These things are machines that have been fine-tuned to create this world and continue every day to be fine-tuned. Like they're not in there adjusting them to try to quell these protests right now.
Right.
They're having meetings about, holy shit, look how much money we're making. These platforms, with the exception of Reddit, right, which I think it is actually one of the more healthier platforms, though it has its own problems, let you downvote, right? Twitter and Facebook only allows you to amplify. And I'm sure, inside their heads, they're like, well, it's the same thing. If my algorithm only counts things people like to engage with, then it sorts itself out. But it's actually not. Like the ability to reduce the signal on something actively, both as an agent, me clicking the button makes me feel better that I'm sharing the downside of this. I'm also giving feedback to the poster that, hey, not only am I ignoring this, but I actually think it's bad content, right? And I'm giving your algorithm that same message, right? But Twitter and Facebook aren't interested in understanding what's bad content at all. They're only interested in what people think is good content, where they spend more time, because they're selling ads. Like ads don't care what you don't like, right? You're never going to buy what you don't like. They only care what you're going to spend, either what you like, or the other thing, whoever's selling the ad, in the case of Facebook or Twitter, is kind of keep you on the platform long enough until I can figure out how to put an ad in front of you that you do like, right? And so engagement, driving these engagement loops is all about amplification, not about curation, right? And it's the inherent evil inside the platforms.
So are you suggesting that one of the potential solutions to our problems is dislike?
Because of free speech, I've got to let it be said, right? And what the problem is with that story, without a dislike button, it proves the lie, right? Because again, ads don't care about what you don't like. They only care about what you like and what you engage with. And so because these, the decision made in the boardroom, and surely, every 6 months, someone on Twitter or smart says, hey, man, I wish Twitter had a dislike button, or whatever. They've made a conscious decision to ignore it. And it's not for free speech, right? Like free speech, if I have free speech, I should be able to tell you I don't like something, right? It's only because they're there to make money. And the dislike button has no utility to make money.
So let's talk about that. Let's talk about the underlying systems, because something has happened, right? Corporations, especially in a capitalist society like ours, have always been about making money, but something has shifted. There are 621 billionaires in the United States. 416 of them are self-made. That's quite an astronomical number. So what has created that? I mean, you and I have talked about there's an elitist culture inside of tech that is leading the way to creating these algorithms. And tech, arguably is one of the biggest profit centers for the United States, if not the world.
Yeah, I think it's, when you talk about tech and you specifically are talking about, venture capital supported technology, these are high risk, high reward types of businesses. And the whole system starts on the thesis that I'm some kind of investor, and I'm going to make a certain number of bets, whether it's 50 or 100 or whatever from this pool of money I have, whether it's 5 million or 500 million. And I expect 2 or 3, I expect 1/3 of those bets to fail and go totally to zero. And I expect 1/3 of those bets to probably return about the amount of money I put into them if they're all averaged together. And then I expect 1/3 of those bets to do really well. And kind of really, that's where all my return is. And a very small number of that 1/3 of bets that are doing really well, maybe just one of them, even out of 100, I expect to be this amazing success story. The $100 billion Facebook or $35 billion Zoom or Uber or whatever that comes out of it. And so at the very beginning of the whole thing is this system set up to seek out these hyper successful things and to create this small number of super successful companies. And it's really important to understand this. If you have an idea that has no chance of being $100 billion or $50 billion company, VCs aren't even interested in funding it, right? So just out the gate, a whole bunch of ideas and a whole class of entrepreneurs are cut out. And a whole class of problems that need to be addressed by the world have zero interest in being invested in because they're not big enough money makers to attract.
If they're not, how big? 50 billion or 100?
To be fair, it's probably closer to the minimal threshold is probably, I think what most VCs would say is if I can't see there's $1 billion
right
company being generated here, that's the floor cutoff. Though most of them really want to see a $10 billion story, right? And there's got to be some hope, right? And if there's no hope, then the problem is even if there's pretty good hope, it's $1 billion story because of the way the odds work. All of a sudden, if only a third of my $1 billion dreams come true, the average dream might only be worth, $200 million or whatever. So some of your dreams have to be these $10 billion, $20 billion potential or $100 billion companies in order for the portfolio math to work for the VCs, right? So the VCs aren't setting out to do evil or to create inequality, but the way the math works, it's a system that actually is hyper efficient at creating inequality and not tackling a whole bunch of problems that entrepreneurs want to tackle, especially entrepreneurs that are more disadvantaged because they're living in some of these problems. That venture capital is trained to not pursue those investments.
Right.
And when you're in this startup, let's say you sell the dream to the VC and they write you a check. As soon as your startup demonstrates that it's not going to hit that dream, the VCs lose interest. They would just as soon see your company go to zero. And it sounds crazy, then actually get their money back because they want to focus their time and effort on, where's that $1 billion company and where's that $10 billion company? And so the moment your startup has weakness, that it's not going to achieve this multi-billion-dollar outcome that VCs are hoping for, they rapidly lose interest. And it's very hard to get funding to continue.
So their system is designed for the 1%, or is it the 0.01%?
It's the 0.01%, an okay outcome for VC creates a bunch of 1%ers, right? And then, and employees and the founders are getting that a tenth of 1% or higher class. But what the VCs really want to do is they are looking to create the next Mark Zuckerberg, right? And because that makes the VC rich also.
Okay, so
the whole system is set to do that.
So that's interesting, because that seems to parallel how the system is designed on an individual wealth accumulation basis. Like, just some quick math, I think most people, when they picture someone really successful, I don't think they're picturing someone who's made $1 million. And they're probably not picturing someone who's made $10 million. The media promotes someone who's made $1 billion, right? But I don't think, people have done the math, because, there's all this talk about the 1% versus the 99%, but it's not. A billionaire is the 0.0004%, which means it's 0.0004 versus 99.9996, right? And it's not the 99.1. And out of that 0.0004%, those aren't even the self-made ones. If we just look at the self-made billionaires, it's 0.00032%. I mean, that whole game is rigged, and it mirrors how the VCs are set up.
Yeah, no, that's right. Yeah, the VCs, and then also just the way power works as well, right? So, capital is just one form of power, but political power also, follows the billionaires. I mean, look at, everybody's kind of praising Jack at Twitter for finally standing up to Donald Trump.
Right.
That Twitter basically, that Facebook got elected, and then Twitter just helped empower massively by ignoring their own terms of service that they ruthlessly apply to everyone else. And so now Jack's got this monster on his hands who could put Jack in jail, could shut down Twitter, could put other Twitter employees in jail. Like Trump called out, one of Twitter's content executives. And not, the dumb thing that the founders of these companies or the executives, they get a little arrogant and they're like, we're rich or we're powerful because we have our platform. But, Trump's not going to go after Twitter for some, legal issue that related to how they manage tweets. Even though, that's what he might signal. He's going to go after them for, the countless other crimes large companies always commit, either intentionally or unintentionally, by the fact that they're large, right? Like Twitter is going to have a huge history of civil and possibly even criminal things that, if a government wants to go after them, that they could tap into, or even Jack personally or the other executives, a tax issue or some kind of past thing that, once a state actor, a powerful one like the United States or Russia or China or Great Britain or whatever, has you in their sights, they have massive number of tools to exert pressure. But in the meantime, Jack's sitting there, and as a multi-billionaire in control of a platform in America in particular, so he's got some leverage, and he does have some ability to push back, and you're seeing it in Twitter, where if Ron or Tony all of a sudden had the eye of Donald Trump and we were arguing about something on Twitter, we'd be in a much different situation.
Yeah.
So these billionaires, this tiny percentage of the population, not only has the money, but they're in the room arguing with the president of the United States, right? Or influencing the president of the United States, right? There's not a lot of millionaires hanging around the Trump White House. They're all billionaires. or on their way to being billionaires. And so this power, the inequality uh, accelerates, right? The money's just one leg on the stool.
So yeah, let's talk about how. So we talked about how the system is designed for elitism, for the 0.01%, both from a VC perspective and from like an individual wealth accumulation perspective, shooting to be a billionaire. Maybe let's shift the topic to this elitist culture that is inside tech. You and I have talked about how this elitism is rooted in competition, optimization, and even maybe some implicit prejudice or explicit prejudice. I'm not quite sure. Like, what's the best, most tangible example about tech elitism? Like, I think you brought up the example of, this uber competitive drive whereby people aren't healthy, like just working out, 3-4 times a week. It's taken to an extreme. It's like 2 to 3 hours a day, 5, 6, 7 days a week, or biking 100 miles a week or 100 miles a day.
Yeah, no, that's right. Yeah, I think, and there's subcultures inside tech like there are in anything, but there's definitely this very strong, competitive fitness culture where that actually probably works to the detriment of both the participants and the companies they're in, but just because of the misplaced energy. But where it's not good enough that, hey, I own a bike and I went on a bike ride over the weekend or I did something, but it is like, hey, I did 100 miles through the Malibu canyons, before work this morning, and I'm going to do it again tomorrow. And if you want to be an executive of this company and you're not doing something like that, you're obviously not fit enough to have the high energy and the competitive spirit to drive to create this unicorn multi-billion-dollar thing. When in reality, it's just, they're all relatively rich, even if they're not billionaires yet. You're making high 6-figure salaries, or you come from that already from a background, and so it's just one more thing actually just to compete on, right? It's a status thing,
right? It's a badge of honor.
It's a badge of honor, but they take over, inside companies, because if you go back to this VC concept of amplifying the winners and ignoring like people doing pretty good, like, oh wow, you created $100 million company. VCs call those lifestyle businesses. Literally.
Shut up. 100 million is a lifestyle business?
It's a lifestyle business for a lot of VCs. There's VCs who write small checks that would love to have $100 million startup. But for the most part, like if you spent 4 years building $100 million business, or 5 years, and it was just going to grow 10% a year from there on out, most VCs would think of that as essentially a bad investment.
Okay. Let me just pick up on that lifestyle thing. Because, I did the math on a 168-hour week, right? Those are the number of hours in a week. And I just started calculating. So before I go down this numbers route, the idea of a lifestyle business is presumably that if it's only going to be $100 million, you must not be working that hard. You must have a life too. That's why it's called a lifestyle business. Am I right?
Yeah, it's definitely right. It's definitely part of it, or it's a personal choice type business of, oh, that's cool. You're gonna go work on one of society's problems and make some money. You're doing Uber for kids, right? So that parents can get their kids to school or whatever. VCs would see something like that as, oh, a cool idea. I might even use it myself as a VC, but I don't think, it's going to be a $10 billion business. So it's not for me. It's a great mission for you. Go help, kids get to school.
Okay. So check this out. I'm putting it on screen. So 168 hours. I imagined that most, let's say, tech elite who are just grinding and crushing, they're not sleeping 8 hours a week. I know that. I've coached many. They're targeting 6, optimize how much they're sleeping, right?
Yeah.
So that's 56 hours. And then a 65-hour work week, I think, is pretty normal for the tech elite, right? So,
Yeah.
and then out of 7 days a week, I put 5 hours for getting ready. Like presumably you have to shower, get dressed, and then eat something. And then I put it the same about winding down for bed. And, maybe some people hit the pillow and don't use 5 hours a week. Eating 3 meals a day, 25 hours. And the obligatory social media phone time of 11 hours per week. And that's conservative, right?
Yeah.
Take a guess how many hours are left after just doing those things.
I have no idea. Just tell me.
One,
yeah.
1 hour. So that does not include like any sort of meditation, exercise, downtime, time with a spouse or kids, or it doesn't even include commuting, time with friends, hobbies, nothing.
Yeah, I get it. And this is why when you and I were talking and I was railing on the fitness thing, it's not just because I'm overweight and I could spend more time in the gym. It's because, like, when I was at a job a few years ago, I read a lot instead of going to the gym, and with kids now I read less. But I probably peaked somewhere around 2008 or 2009, right before my kids were old enough to walk around and start engaging, and at that point I was probably reading 1 to 2 books a week, right? Sometimes more. I bet there'd be a week I could read 4 books or something, and it took me a while to get that down to where now I read a much more. I'm probably only doing a couple of books a month now, maybe, and but I remember 2013ish or so, I was in a conversation and we were talking about something that I was sharing, and one of the executives had called out, like, Ron, I'm really worried. You read so much. Where are you finding time for work? Right. And this is an executive who spends hours in the gym every day. And to me, it was like, wow, like, this is definitely a problem inside companies. Basically the executives get dumber because just what you said, they have an hour left after just doing the basics. They don't have time to read, right? Like, no. And so anybody who's going to the gym, like if you're in a tech startup and you're an executive and you're choosing to go to the gym for more than 20 minutes a day or something for your basic kind of fitness level, you're choosing not to read, or choosing not to learn something, or choosing not to understand what's happening in society, or whatever it is, and so you're going to end up with really bad companies, even before you stack on all the personal problems of I'm ignoring my kids or my wife or whatever, right? Also,
well, I think that's where you and I disagree, because I would say that yes, they're not reading and you got to read, but something else is askew if you don't have time to take care of your health. I firmly believe that your physical health improves your mental capabilities, not just keeps you healthy, improves them. So there's something definitely wrong if you don't have time to exercise. I mean, most people have to commute, spend time with kids. I didn't even get down to like repairing the house, washing a car, budgeting, accounting, cleaning the house, all that stuff. The things are out of balance.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's really the point I'm making. It's not, I'm not telling people don't exercise or that I should exercise more. It's really, if you're doing these tech startups in particular, right? So it's very, very hard to create a multi-billion-dollar company in 5 or 7 years working less than 40 hours a week, right? And so if you're in the leadership team, whether it's executive or a manager or a senior technical kind of resource, you're going to be doing 60 hours a week, really whether you want to or not. And maybe as the company matures, you get that down to 50 or something. And then when it's like, if you work at Facebook now, it's probably very easy to do a 40 or 35 hour week and make it seem like you're even working 50. at a company like that. But I think you have to make choices, right? So, and full circle back to this, if you're going to create this culture where it's a gym 3 hours a day or biking canyons or whatever it is, this competitiveness, it creates focus inside these companies on the wrong things, right? Instead of building more healthy outcomes in the companies for the people, whether it's spending time with their family or getting educated in some topic or whatever. And the competitiveness doesn't have to be on gyms. It could be, we're all day traders on the side, or we all like to gamble in Vegas or whatever it is. We all like to chase women, or who knows, what these subcultures are in all these companies where, whatever they're competing on. Right. The movie American Psycho is probably a great dark comedy view of how far this competition can go.
So tying together the thread of chasing the money, competitiveness, optimizing into how that has manifested its way into tech tools and how it's affected the even broader community is communication, right? So in 2009, Facebook introduced the like. And I think that's becoming more commonly known as a watershed moment, because from that point on, communication became competitive. That's when people started posting, how great their lives were, and, with their cars and vacations and whatnot, and they would compete for likes. And then Twitter came out with retweets and likes, etc. And the whole culture became about competition through communication and through these social media platforms. And so I think that is one of the biggest areas of both leverage and it is a problematic factor for creating discord.
It's part of the lie of the freedom of speech, right? Like, hey, I'm going to give everybody a voice. I'm not going to censor anyone, whether it's the president or someone else, and unless it gets egregious. And then, but if you're a person that invites me to cool parties, or you can get me to the White House, I'm definitely never going to censor you. But almost everybody else, I'll do some light censorship if I think it gets really egregious. But overall, I think I'm for freedom of speech. Me as Jack or Zuckerberg or whatever. But the lie in it is back to this issue, because what you're seeing is actually the platform is shaping what they're saying, right? In the coronavirus, the platform is amplifying all of the political and partisan issues around coronavirus, and they're saying, like, I'm not going to wear a mask, or either because I don't believe in one, because the platform has allowed misinformation to spread, or because I think it's a political hoax, or whatever. And then in the very next set of instances where we have the riot and protest, the platform is now teaching me to say something else. And so I actually don't have freedom of speech or agency. I just become, because my dopamine hit is needed and the platform needs me to engage to make money, I just become another mouthpiece for the platform.
Exactly. You become a mouthpiece for your amygdala, right? So the platform has heightened your fight-flight response in your amygdala, and you just react and type out, further creating more engagement on the platform.
Yeah, that's right. And further constraining speech. It's a super interesting thing that that these tech companies have created, right? And it works at different levels. I mean, there's for sure, you take Arab Spring, which was actually an early warning of where we are now, but was super successful moment of free speech, right? Like, finally people got smartphones in Egypt and Libya and other parts of the North Africa and the Arab world, and they finally had a way to organize and that the state couldn't easily control, and it led to some overthrows of some real asshole dictators or whatever, and in those countries, some of which are a little better off, some are back at the verge of war, actually, as we speak right now. and so it's easy, I think, to say, look, these platforms can do good. But actually it wasn't their intent. The intent, it was the good was, now in hindsight, right? It was just a side effect
Right.
of the tools that and the business decision these platforms have made, and now there's less and less good, or the good. Maybe net there is actually more good. Maybe there's an argument if you added it all up, but the bad has still outweighed it.
I see this like recursive pattern forming within designers and engineers. And then that mindset created a competitive tool for divisiveness. And then that has influence. It has the designed impact on the greater society. And then that divisiveness creates more money and more profits to the company and the people who designed and created it, which then makes them winners, which then continues their behavior. I mean,
yeah. Right. And the money flows back to the beginning, right? To the VCs and the investors that kicked it all off to find the next crop, right? Like there's another generation of social things coming that'll be more powerful. Like there's a voice chat tool that's taking off right now. Just a mind blank at the moment that, the VCs and their friends are often little private rooms talking to each other at night. And Andreessen Horowitz just put $100 million into it, and basically reinventing the party line from the early phone systems in the 40s and 50s, where one neighborhood would share a phone number, and everybody's phone would ring if someone got a phone call, and you could listen in. You could just pick up the handset and listen.
Oh, wow!
And there was etiquette set up in terms of how to manage that so that people could get privacy, but it was expected. It wasn't enforced. And now there's a startup that's providing this kind of similar effect where you and I can call in and, instead of watching this podcast, everybody could just jump in and without video, because it preserves some privacy and creates a different vibe. And they're talking. And right now it's a group of very elite people that have access to this tool. It's just a few thousand people that are invited to special rooms and chatting about whatever they find interesting. That startup just raised at $100 million valuation, right? And so, and it's from the same people, Andreessen Horowitz, who made a bunch of money on Facebook going public, right? And who still advise Facebook about how to make the next platform better for society. They're leading the conversation about, hey, how to make the next platform make more money than Facebook.
What's interesting is, I was watching a couple podcasts and TED Talks. One on Daniel Markovits, who has a book called The Meritocracy Trap, and Nick Hanauer, who's talking about reinventing capitalism. And they're advocating policy changes to reinvent capitalism. But what's interesting about our conversation is that it's policy changes, but within a very specific industry and a very small group of people within tech. To reinvent not only the maybe venture capital model, but business models and culture. And the tech industry is, fewer people than making policy changes for the entire United States. So I'm suggesting maybe it's a smaller chunk and maybe it's more easily done.
Yeah, like I think it's one of the key things. I think venture capitalists, they'll rightly say, we're a tiny part of the amount of money that flows into the economy. You add up all the VC dollars and we can look it up or whatever, but it's somewhere on the order of a few $100 billion a year that VCs pump into startups compared to the the Federal Reserve just dumped $6 trillion right into the system just out of the coronavirus, they have a tiny amount of dollars relative to what's happening, but they do have this super outsized impact, and it's in part because of this competitive thing they set up. It's in part the business model isn't necessarily evil in the sense of we need big winners to take big risks, right? If we're going to try to get move society forward in a progressive way with better medical technology or better, like part of the reason why these protests are happening is because everybody's got a camera in their hand now with basically unlimited storage. That's a net good probably for society, right? So you have to have this system that can take these big risks, and it needs big rewards. But what these, so a lot of VCs sit back, and a lot of VCs, as a group are being criticized because very few are actually talking about these protests right now or the Black Lives Matter movement, because they don't want to upset their limited partners who are making investments in the VC funds.
We talked a little bit about optimization. It's just imbalanced optimization. It's optimized for only one thing. And it's ignoring the effects, the unwanted effects it's having on business and culture.
Yeah, look, I think that's the most charitable view of it, right? So so if you want to take the high road and you don't want to risk offending any VCs, right? That's the to tweet out. And I think with some VCs is true, right? And some founders is true. But I also think, though, there are VCs who believe this is how society should run, and it's actually okay. I mean, take Peter Thiel in his book 1 to 0, and Thiel was a Facebook board member. I think still is a Facebook board member, and very close advisor to Zuckerberg. But his book 1 to 0 celebrated across the VC community and the tech community as one of the most important books for tech executives to read. And its entire thesis is your business sucks if you're not creating a monopoly, right? And it's very rational. It's a very smart thesis in the sense of, there's basically two states a business can be in: perfect competition. You'll either land in perfect competition, where margins will be small, where it's bloody fight day to day with all your competitors, right. Or you will land, I'm a monopoly, or possibly some kind of small duopoly or something like that. Basically a winner take all scenario. And as a VC and as a founder, he advises, don't start businesses that you don't think can land here, right? Like ignore the ones where there's a lot of competition. But actually, it's pretty hardwired in the system that at the end of the day, they're like, look, let's just create this giant monopoly. Let's get rich. And then once you're rich, you get to set up the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative, and you can go do good in the world, right? Or the Gates Family Foundation or whatever. That's the ethos that I think they've all convinced themselves is the way you make good on all the damage you do.
Well, yeah, I guess Bill Gates would argue for that now that he's doing it, but I don't think the world could survive waiting until someone reaches some sort of awakening and does what Bill Gates does.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, just really quick, one other just quick thing that just popped up on Twitter earlier this weekend. Speaking of Chan Zuckerberg Initiative, right? The Zuckerberg Family Foundation. Something like 70 or 100 or 150 or whatever of the grant recipients, which are mostly scientists, are sent a letter saying, "Hey, look, this is your refusal to step in and properly manage this platform and the misinformation that Trump spreads and the misinformation around the damage done by the people attacking Black Lives Matters or whatever is directly in conflict with what you're trying to achieve with your foundation." So why are you giving us money to go solve this problem when you could just solve it by fixing your goddamn platform?
I think so. This sets us up nicely for the next episode. And I wanted to talk about how we can hack this one-sided perspective of competition and elitism. And maybe one way to hack it is through the mindset. And so what's interesting is meditation and meditation. It has a fairly strong foothold in technology. Like a lot of people meditate.
Yeah.
But what's interesting is the more they meditate, the more they will become in direct conflict with their one-sided perspective. So I'd like to talk about how meditation, awareness, introspection can possibly be the one way to balance this one-sided, optimized, all-for-profit, take everything you can get perspective.